Hello and welcome to another video from Flash Jazz Cat. Now, as you can see, we've got an Atari 130XE on the desk. This is my Ultimate 1MB VBXE Atari 130XE, and what we're going to do with this one is fit it with a decent XE keyboard. The decent XE keyboard was designed by Bertrand Leroy, who is also known as Screaming at the Radio on the Atari Age forum, and here it is. I've had this in kit form for quite some time now. It was sent in by Jesse Warford some months ago, but I hadn't got around to making a video yet about how to put it together because I'd had various problems with alignment of the console keys and that kind of thing, but I've sorted them all out now and we're going to put the keyboard together on video. But before we do that, a word from this video's sponsor. And the sponsor for this video is, of course, PCBWay. PCBWay have been experts in the field of printed circuit board prototyping and manufacture for 9 years now. And they offer a fantastic range of services, including CNC machining, 3D printing, sheet metal fabrication and injection moulding. They have a fantastic front end on the website where you can put in all the parameters of your project and get an instant quote. So, if you're in need of a printed circuit board, why not pop down to PCBWay today and take advantage of the special offer by using the link in the description under the video. Now, as I say, I've had this keyboard here for quite some time now in an incomplete state, and one of the reasons that I haven't gotten around to building it before now is that after trying the graphite coloured aftermarket console keys, I didn't really like the look of them, although I was really pleased that I went with the Falcon-style grey keys. That's Falcon, YouTube, Falcon. But I set myself the challenge of using the original console keys anyway, which Bertrand told me that was pretty straightforward. But I encountered various problems. One of the problems that I encountered was that I didn't realise that the low-profile switches that go under the console keys actually go on the bottom plate, the PCB itself, directly rather than on the top plate, and that was purely my fault for not carefully reading the wiki. But it's just generally the way with new projects like this. When people start to build them, you have to overcome various misunderstandings and problems, and there was definitely an issue with getting the alignment of the console keys just right. And I was being a perfectionist about it, there's no question about it, but I think with good reason, because I think, as we'll see, hopefully by the end of the build, it's really important to get these details right for the keyboard to actually look good when it's sitting in the machine. So the keyboard as a whole comprises a top plate and the PCB, double layer PCB underneath, which has all the traces and vias on it. The two plates sandwich the switches together, so when you solder the switches on, it's going to hold that top plate to the bottom PCB and make quite a solid unit. There's nothing on the edges of the structure, so I don't know how sturdy it's actually going to be, but hopefully it will be pretty solid, because the last thing you want is a curve on the keyboard. Now, the designer of this keyboard, Bertrand Leroy, has a very nice GitHub page here with the whole project on and everything you need to make it. And where I came a little bit unstuck was basically not reading the how-to, but there is a building guide here which tells you everything you need to know: bill of materials, the plate, the main board, the connectors, how to go about printing keys, the two different options. You can either install this with the vintage keycaps or the modern replacement keycaps. In my case, I went for the modern keycaps and the original console keys. You could go in the opposite direction, or you could have a completely original keyboard. Now, the problems that I had, were quite numerous. Originally, I'd gone for the replacement console keys. Now, the first set of those that I received, I actually painted them. I think, on balance, on reflection, I think if you're going to go for these, trying to do a paint job that looks authentic is not easy, and I think it'd probably be better to just keep them the original colour if you're going to go for these ones. Nevertheless, I did paint them, and but they sat a little bit high, and we had a tremendous amount of emails going back and forth, because if these console keys on the XE don't sit straight and they don't sit at the right level, it looks terrible. Now, I was assured by Jesse and Bertrand that it should sit properly, and half of the problems that I had, as I say, were caused by a complete misunderstanding of where the switch for the console key was actually supposed to go. But somewhere along the way anyway, I elected to go for the original console keys, and as I say, they require these adapters. Now, these adapters, the geometry of them is absolutely critical, and I've had a lot of talk with Bertrand about this as well. With each layer of indirection, if you like, or adapter that's between the switch itself and the top of the key, any deviations in the trueness of the angles and the way that the key sits in the switch are going to be amplified, such that the key is it goes off kilter and looks quite bad. Now, the adapters that I had that I think Bertrand had originally sent me, what I found is that if the top of this post isn't actually 90 degrees with the sides, when it goes into the bottom of the key, so if we pull this one out here, so that's going to push in there, obviously, and it goes into the little sleeve. But as you actually use the keyboard, it's obviously the tendency is for that post to travel further and further in and become tighter and tighter. Now, there's a sufficient amount of give in this split sleeve here that if the top of that adapter isn't parallel to the sides, you get a slight twist. Now, you've got another point of potential problems here at the bottom, likewise, because that's got to sit in the top of the switch like this. Now, with some of the adapters, I was also finding that when the key returned after you'd pressed it, the mass of the key was actually dragging the adapter out of the switch, which caused all kinds of problems. Now, I'd tried to file these down to get them straight, and it's almost impossible to do. So what I ended up doing was getting a second set of adapters, and I was going to get them 3D printed myself, but Bertrand yet again kindly offered to send another set. But before we made that arrangement, I actually approached another friend of mine, who you'll know as Beeblebrox on the Atari Age forum perhaps, and he has a 3D printer, and he was really keen to print all sorts of stuff out, as I suppose you probably are when you first get a 3D printer. And anyway, I asked him for help with it, and sure enough, he obliged pretty quickly, and he printed out a set of adapters. Now, the funny thing was, they're not quite as neat and tidy as the ones that came out of Bertrand's printer, but the funny thing is, the top edge is actually straighter and more perpendicular to the sides than Bertrand's prints were. So I actually ended up going with these. The issue I had with them is that they were so tight in the key switch itself, it required a little bit of filing down to actually get them to go in. But the advantage of that is that they are really solid in the switch and they can't come out. So in any case, if you're going to have any problems with this keyboard putting it together, this is where you're going to have problems, in my opinion. I don't think it would be such a problem with the rest of the keys, but with the console keys certainly. I think the alignment, for as far as aesthetics are concerned, is pretty critical. Anyway, I'm going to put the last wide key stabilizer on here. Now, the original design of the board, there's a bit of an error, which has been corrected on later revisions. The flex connector here gets in the way of the two retaining screws that you'd need to use to actually bolt the stabilizer in place, but apparently that's no problem, and it will hold in by tension apparently, so it says in the instructions, once the key's in, I'm assuming. So that should be okay. Now, one thing I mustn't forget before I put this together is the LED, of course. So, now, there isn't a hole in the top of the keyboard for the LED to shine through, but it does seem to work if it just shines out the side, and I can't be bothered to drill a hole in it, so I'm not. Now, there's a couple of jumpers I need to solder in for the modern layout. These simply dictate whether the caps key is over on the right hand side for the old layout, or whether it's over here on the new layout, which makes it a little bit more compatible with a modern keyboard, if you like. But it's always confusing moving from a PC keyboard to an Atari keyboard. It wasn't immediately clear to me from the silk screen or the instructions how this jumper was supposed to go on anyway, so I sent Bertrand a little direct message, and he got back to me straight away and explained how it's supposed to be done. And I didn't want to forget this or get it wrong and then put the two plates together and find that I'd completely messed up the jumpers. Right, so I think if I put this stabilizer in here, I pray we're actually ready to put the two plates together. Should be. No. What I should probably do first is put the low profile switches on for the console keys. I'm leaving the little adapters on while I'm soldering these on, because the ones I chose to use, the 3D prints I chose to use from Beeblebrox, they're a little bit brittle, and they do tend to break if I take them out of the switch. So once they're in, and they, as I said, they're quite stiff, they're quite a tight fit, so once they're in, I prefer not to take them out again. Now there's a jumper up here for the backlight. Now I'm not bothered about the backlight, I don't want the thing to light up, so I'm not going to bother with that. So now anyway, I should be able to drop this on, hopefully, if I haven't forgotten anything. If I have forgotten something, it'll just be hilarious, so... Right, so we want to make sure that when we solder these in, they're flat on the bottom PCB. So I'm sort of doing one leg and then nipping it together to make sure it is flat. You can just hear it, you can just feel it sort of creep there. And once I've got a few holding the thing together properly, then I won't have to do that anymore, because the thing will be the two plates will be held together by a fixed distance, so I won't have to worry about whether or not everything's seated properly. Oh, for fuck's sake. Right, so you rejoin me when I've more or less finished putting this thing together, and the eagle-eyed among you will have noticed some tremendous errors that I committed, from which I had to frantically recover off camera, because it was just too embarrassing for words. The first thing I did wrong was put one of the console keys up here. It'll become painfully obvious when I edit this video down, of course. But that wasn't the first thing I noticed. It was the stabilizer under the delete key. Since that one's not screwed in because of the error on the board here, it actually fell out, unbeknownst to me. This is what happens when you try to make a video while you're working, of course. It fell out before I sandwiched the two halves of the keyboard together. So I'd soldered all the switches in, and then I noticed that the stabilizer fell out. So I had to get the desoldering gun and desolder most of the switches on this side of the board, so I could prise the thing apart, get the stabilizer in. And it doesn't really sit very well without the screws in, I have to say. It's not great, but I'm sure it'll be fine.
Nah, it'll be fine.
But what I think the thing to do here, and it won't be a problem on the kits that you get, or the production boards going forward, because this has been fixed, but I think the thing I should have done, of course, is put the screws in temporarily before I put the two halves of the keyboard together. And then it wouldn't have fallen out and I wouldn't have had that problem. So anyway, I desoldered a lot of the switches, prized it apart, put that in, and then I noticed that I'd put one of the console key switches over here instead of in the reset position. So I had to desolder a load of them again and prise that apart and fit the switch in. And so that's it, basically. The console keys don't look too bad. I'm going to be interested to see how they line up when the thing's actually in the case, because that was a big bone of contention with me. Because I knew it was going to look awful if the console keys didn't look reasonably straight, and they don't look too bad it is very tricky, or it's going to be very tricky going forward to get these to line up properly on these adapters. I found in some cases simply taking the adapter out and turning it round, the help key was leaning forward at a funny angle. So I took the adapter out, spun it round 180 degrees, put it back in, and that sort of cancelled out whatever was causing it to sit at a funny angle. The other thing is that these particular keys, the little guides on the key itself, they bottom out on the bottom of the keyboard. I think either there should be a hole in the bottom plate so that stabilizer can pass through both levels, or you could just file the stabilizer down. You couldn't file it down too much, of course, because it only protrudes through the top by a small amount, but I think if you took about 1 millimeter off the guide, which I could do later on, that would probably help. Because what you'll end up with otherwise is there'll be creep over time when you use these switches as the adapters push themselves further into the bottom of the key. So it's quite a fiddly design problem, but Bertrand has continually refined the design over time, and I'm sure he'll continue to do so. So I've put some of the keys on. This is the fun part, of course, sticking the keycaps on. I've elected to go for the fairly traditional layout. You do get this quite attractive, I did get this quite attractive break key with the text in a sort of a pinky colour, which is going to be quite nice. But anyway, I've gone for the white one. There's numerous different designs Jesse made for the reverse video key. So the Atari logo makes a welcome return. I personally, as I say, I like the sort of minimalist look of that little Atari logo in the corner. Helpfully, the keyboard itself actually has the letters stamped on it. So we've got the C key. We know the C key goes here. So this is fun. Oh, actually, I like that one. I found another reverse video key that I like even better. That one. I think that's nicer. Right. So let's continue. Right, so we've got almost all of the keys in place now, apart from the escape key. And what Jesse has clearly designed here as well is a nice little selection of Pac-Man characters that you can use in place of the escape key if you prefer. You could have that little fellow there, or you could have that character in the corner if you wanted to. But I'm going to go for a traditional escape key. You also get a few blank keys here as well. I still haven't quite made my mind up about the choice of inverse video key. I think I'm going to go with that one for the time being. That's something I can chop and change to my heart's content. So anyway, we'll put these away and pop the escape key cap down in the corner. So there we go. That is the finished keyboard, and I think it looks very nice indeed. But we won't know for sure until we actually put it in the computer, so let's go ahead and do exactly that. Right, so this is the machine that's going to get the keyboard. As I mentioned earlier on, this one has the keyboard in it that Jesse kindly let me keep, so we'll remove that. I noticed the power LED is actually broken on this one. I didn't notice that before, so I'll have to fix that anyway. So we'll do a little test fit before we actually wire it up. Yeah, the console keys are sitting a little bit high, but I think that's because of the problem I mentioned before, whereby they're not actually pushed fully home. I think if they were pushed fully home on the adapters, they would actually be flush with the top of the case. So I'll take care of that later on. I think what I'm going to have to do is do what I mentioned and file off those guides on the keycaps themselves. So there it is. So that is our Falcon-esque Atari 130XE. It makes you realise how wide the spacebar is on the original XE keyboard actually. Yeah, and that delete key is definitely sitting a bit high as well, but never mind, it's not too bad. So let's push the adapter into the computer. I think we've got a problem already here. Yeah, I don't think I'm going to have any choice but to mount this on header pins because it sticks up too far for the keyboard to actually sit properly. I wonder if I can just push it back temporarily for a moment. That's not too bad. That'll do. Yeah, that looks okay. So for the purposes of testing, I think that should be fine. So let's give it a little spin. Okay, let's turn it on and see if the power light comes on. Power light's on. It's not terribly bright, I have to say, but it is apparent that it's on. Right, so the machine works. Let's see how the keyboard goes. That feels very nice indeed, I have to say. Very nice indeed. Yeah, that's lovely. It feels pretty solid. I will feel more solid when I've got the case screwed together, of course. If I can find the screws. This machine's been in bits for weeks. Let's test the console keys. Yep, that's looking pretty good. Oh yes. So you can, if you want, go for the clicky keel switches if you prefer. I opted not to because the Atari's got a key click built into it anyway, so it's not really needed. Escape key works. Yep, everything works. Break key in the new position. Control key, so we've got the control characters there. Absolutely no problem at all. Yeah, if I could actually type, that would be extremely smooth. So yeah, I just can't believe I've finally got the thing put together after all these months. Largely down to my not reading the installation instructions and a combination of just struggling to get these console keys, the original console keys, to sit properly and understand how that was supposed to happen. And I think if I file down those guides on the actual keycaps a little bit, and that'll let them bottom out properly, and I think they'll all drop by about 1 millimeter. That'll close up that little gap at the front there, and it should make them pretty much level with the top of the case. They're about 1 millimeter too high at the moment. That's undoubtedly the most difficult part of putting this thing together, and if Bertrand's managed to take care of the alignment of the console keys on the XL as well, which is going to be similarly critical because it's going to look awful if they're all crooked and not sitting true in that little gap on the right hand side of the XL machine. We'll have problems, but I'm sure he's taking care of that as well. So I think it looks nice, it feels nice. Now the plan is that I'm going to be the UK distributor and manufacturer of these keyboards later this year. So I'll be selling complete units to order, so with your choice of keycaps, etc, etc, and I suppose kits as well. And I'm imagining the kits will basically be the plates, the PCB, the plate, and you probably get to order your own switches, or I'll have a stock of switches. I don't know how it's going to work out at the moment, but that's the plan anyway. So, and I'm kind of looking forward to that because I think I've learned some valuable lessons from finally putting this thing together. I know exactly what mistakes not to make. So yes, I'm very much looking forward to that, and it's I think especially with the XEs, it's a valuable thing to have a high quality replacement keyboard, which will probably last the life of the machine quite easily. Because the XE keyboards, there was the Mitsumi and the other one with the dual layer mylar and the little rubber domes under the keycaps, and they're just awful, and they do eventually wear out and the mylars go to hell. You can get replacement mylars for them, but the other thing about the XE keyboards is that most of the time they tend to go horribly yellow, and you spend half your time retrobrighting the things to make them look presentable. Obviously using modern plastics, that's not going to be a problem, and particularly not a problem with dark keycaps like these. The only thing I'm going to have to worry about with this one is keeping these console keys and the rest of the case presentable. The keyboard will just look after itself, and it's very solid, very durable, and very, very nice to type on. So I do hope you enjoyed that one. It was quite a long time coming. I know I sort of brushed over things a little bit and I made a lot of errors, but we are just about to move house, and as soon as I finish filming this video, I'm going to start completely dismantling this room. This will be the last video you see made at this location ever. So it's the end of an era, but the beginning of a new one. Once I get the new office set up, hopefully I'll have more space, a bigger desk, and things will be a lot easier. I think I'll bring this one to an end now. A massive thank you to Bertrand and to Jesse, both of whom have been a massive help while I've tried to work out various issues with this thing. And I think very patient as well. The design is excellent. I really appreciate the amount of work that Bertrand's put into this. Likewise, Jesse's key designs, they're absolutely marvellous. He's done a fantastic job, and it's a credit to the machine, I think it really is. So sincere thanks to my patrons. As always, your support keeps this channel running, and if you're not already a patron and you're considering becoming one, you might be interested to know that patrons do get early access to every single video published on the channel, unless it's a little throwaway video, but every proper edited video is released about 2 to 3 days early for patrons, with no ads for the duration until it actually goes on general release to everyone. I've also got PayPal links and coffee links, and sometime in the middle of September I'll be back with another video from the new studio, and I'll see you all then. So thank you very much for watching, and bye bye for now.